Hello and welcome to this episode of Trident Talks. I'm Rosie, a senior consultant over at Trident, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Ashish, one of the co-founders over at Andromeda Security. Now, before I ramble on, I'm sure I wouldn't do you any justice. Would you mind just giving a brief introduction of who you are and what really got you to where you are today?
Absolutely. Thank you, Rosie, for inviting me here. I'm looking forward to the conversation. So my name is Ashish Shah. I'm one of the co-founders and head of products here at Andromeda Security. Andromeda is an identity security solution. It's a context-driven, intelligent identity security platform across human, non-human, and agentic AI identities. What got us started was so previously, most of the three of the four founders, we were part of a company called Avi Networks, which was acquired by VMware in 2019, and we were there for a few years after that. We saw that as enterprises moved from on-premises to cloud and SaaS, identity, access management, managing privileges, making sure the attack surface is minimized were real problems. People were using the legacy tools from on-premises to cloud, and that didn't just work in terms of both functionality and operational complexity. So that was the genesis of the idea. And then when we got feedback from CISOs and IAM leaders, we found that, yes, this is one of the top 2 or 3 problems for the enterprises in terms of managing identity sprawl, making sure they have the least privilege, make access management made easy, and governance made easy. So that was the genesis of Andromeda. And here we are, about 2.5 years into the company.
Fantastic. Thank you for kind of running through all of that. And I'm sure we'll dive into more about the background and where you guys are sitting today. So really excited to kind of get stuck in. From what you were just saying then, do you think it was more of like a gap in the market that you noticed rather than like a specific incident that occurred that made you kind of think, aha, like I need to found this company?
Right. No, that's a great question. So the way we think about it is, if you want to start a company, if you want to do something as a startup, you have to solve a hard problem that is big enough that enterprises have a real pain point, and solve it the right way, right? So for us, it was as the transition happened from on-premises to cloud in the mid 2010s and into 2020, we saw that the problem got exacerbated with the adoption of cloud and SaaS. So to give you an idea, when we were on premises, we were primarily smaller number of permissions, entitlement, smaller number of identities. A few things changed over the last few years. One is explosion in identities, human, but also non-human. And now you're seeing natural transition to adoption and growth of agentic AI. Combine that with tens of thousands of granular permissions, like for the right reasons. The cloud provider, the SaaS providers are giving you the ability to have granular roles and access, but the tools hadn't evolved. We were still doing birthright access, giving them broad permissions. And while the principle of least privilege and zero trust was well known, there was no practical way to implement that given that we're using the legacy tools. And then finally, what dawned on a lot of people was identities become the primary attack vector. It is the perimeter for cloud and SaaS. There is no physical perimeter. I think according to the latest stats, 80% of all breaches are identity related. So all of these got combined, right, to see where it's the problem that just kept on getting worse, and that was the genesis of why we started Andromeda.
Okay, it makes sense. And kind of, I guess, continuing on from that, obviously you've been established for what, 2.5 years, you said, kind of early
That's right.
2023.
Yes.
Do you think the vision of Andromeda has kind of changed within that? Like you said, there's been the introduction of like agentic AI, for example, those kind of, I guess, threat vectors are changing. It feels like every day there's something different kind of coming up.
Right. So two-part answer, right? The vision is something which we started with, and for the most part, it has been reinforced, saying we are on the right track. And so the two things, right? The two things that defined Andromeda was, first, we want to solve the problem the right way, which is intelligently automate things, building context. So we spent first year and a half building that context through our data lake architecture, right? And the second core component of what we were building was a unified platform, because there are too many siloed tools. And frankly, it's not just operationally complex, but having siloed tools doesn't allow you to build the context. So that was the part of the vision that we started with. And it has been corroborated. People have appreciated that. Now, vision can't be static, right? Yes, we have evolved a few parts of it, right? So we've now better understood working with customers, and we have a lot of customers now in production, that what aspect of that needed a little bit of tuning versus what the core context of the vision is still valid. We have tuned as we've worked with a few customers, because again, you can't be static. Things evolve, as you said.
No.
Now we have a new form of attack vector. So that's how it's evolved slightly, but I think the core part has remained the same.
Okay, no, makes sense. And I think it'd be really good to, obviously, as we're kind of discussing Andromeda, it's kind of discussing the space more generally as well. We kind of mentioned it, or you mentioned it a moment ago, with thinking about kind of human identities versus non-human identities. And I know there's a lot of companies out there kind of focused on one or the other. You kind of emphasize, I guess, both. Why is it important, I guess, to include non-human identities in your security kind of strategy?
Right, great question. So a few things to consider. First of all, non-human identities are just another form of identity, just like human. The core difference between the two is human identity has a centralized directory service, whether it's IDP or HR systems, etc. Non-human identities, by definition, are distributed, so there is no central place you can discover from. It's a distributed discovery. That's the core difference between the two. Beyond that, you still need to do governance, you still need to do entitlements management, you still need to do life cycles. Why have a separate platform when you're doing 80% of the things that are same? But more importantly, human and non-human identities, their risks, their life cycles are intertwined. NHIs or non-human identities cannot stand on their own, right? They need to be owned by, accountable by a human owner, right? So if you were to solve a non-human identity problem in isolation, you cannot solve it in completion. And as an enterprise, you need to solve both. Why would you have separate tools to solve basically similar things, but just for different sort of identities? And I would say that that has actually been validated now with agentic AI. Well, people think of agentic AI as, oh, just another NHI. Well, not quite. Yes, technically, agentic AIs are non-human identities. They use keys and not passwords to interact with applications. But there are a few core differences from a typical NHI. A typical NHI, like a service account, machine identities, they are very predictable. They either do something repeatedly or not do at all. Human, like you and me, are more ad hoc. We may do a few things here, might do a few things infrequently, right? Agentic AI is a combination, is a hybrid form of identity that can behave like a human. So we think of as a third type of identity that has characteristics of both. Also, from a guardrail perspective, the risk is much higher with agentic AI than non-human identities or even human identities, because if they have excessive privileges, they have overprivileged, they will exploit them. They can on because they'll try everything on their own. So it is extremely important to build guardrails based on the behavioral analysis of agentic AI that mimics a combination of NHIs and human identities. So back to your original questions, why do we think you need a single platform? Because first, you need to solve all kinds of identities. Why have separate platforms? Two, that quietly human and non-human identities are quietly intertwined. And three, it's a natural progression into agentic AI, which is a combination of these two. And
Yeah,
that thesis has been validated, by the way. So, but go ahead.
fantastic. And I really want to kind of get into agentic AI just in a moment. But what do you think, I guess, the biggest risk of non-human identities is? Is it because they're intertwined, or is it something more specific?
So I think there are a couple of things. The non-human identities themselves are not easily, we're not managing them the way the human are, because there is no central location, right? The discovery is hard. So just awareness of what's out there is the first problem. The second problem that most people overlook, right? Every other NHI vendor talks about, well, discovery and key rotation and so on.
Mm.
The problem or the aspect of NHI security that most people overlook is the overprivileges. Because, well, let's be honest, it's not if, it's when your identity will get compromised, human or non-human,
Yeah.
and stats have proven that 80%, right? It's the entitlements, the overprivileges that defines the attack surface. So the most overlooked aspect of NHI or even any security, any identity security is the amount of the privileges they have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that is the other risky part, right? And finally, the third part that most enterprises overlook or most vendors overlook on the NHS side is governance. You need to have accountability of
Yeah.
human ownership, right? Their life cycle. If somebody leaves the organization, um, the NHIs that they were managing have to be either deleted or keyed and reassigned. Otherwise, a person who's left the organization can still access the service account keys, right? So those are the aspects of NHIs that are often overlooked compared to the human identities.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you for running through that. So it seems, like you said, you kind of need that unified platform anyway, but
Mhm.
obviously it's critical to kind of, I guess, bring in these security measures, security kind of methods, I guess, to protect against this. And I guess in many organizations, there's kind of a tension from conversations that I've had, and I'm sure other people as well listening, the tension between kind of having the strong security measures, but actually enabling people to be able to kind of act fast and act well. I think it's like a thin line you have to cross. How does, I guess, Andromeda like approach that balance?
It's a great question, Rosie. In fact, that was one of the early learnings, right?
Mm.
Because in general security, and especially in an identity, it's if you put a gate saying you cannot have access to this entitlement, you have to go through a multi-level approval process. That's going to slow the business down, especially
Yeah.
in cloud and SaaS, where DevOps is extremely important, right? Speed and agility is why we moved to cloud and SaaS in the first place.
Mm.
And if you're going to tell the developers and the users saying, well, you have to wait for a few hours for entitlements approval, it's not going to work. And frankly, that is one of the reasons why some of the least privileged principles, such as just-in-time access, has not been adopted because it impacts the business agility. And that was one of the core principles with which we started Andromeda, saying, how do we solve that the tension between security and agility problem? And that's where intelligent automation comes in. That's where the context building comes in. To give you a specific example, um, from an end user experience point of view, when somebody requests a role using Andromeda or an entitlement using Andromeda, Andromeda's AI is going to analyze it. Let's say, Rosie, you request an entitlement. Has Rosie used this before? Is she coming from the same location, same devices? Does her access pattern look okay or expected within the
Yeah.
norms of your past behavior and your peers' behavior in the organization? If yes, then why ask somebody for approval who's going to rubber stamp it, who has actually less context than the system as a whole, given the context we built in, automatically approve it, right?
Wow.
Go for the
Okay.
speed when the risk is low. Now, it's not a standing access, just-in-time access, right? It's only for the 2 hours or half an hour, as the case may
Mm.
be. But now, let's say you're traveling or you're coming from a different location, so you have not used an access before. We're going to ask somebody for approval because something is off, and that's where we can detect a potential account compromise, right? Because how do you detect an account compromise? Something doesn't look right. Access doesn't look right. The location doesn't look right. The device doesn't look right. The access pattern frequency doesn't look right, right? That's why we had friction, ask somebody for approval. So that's how we strike the
Oh.
the balance between security and agility.
Wow, that's really smart. So it's almost like you have the kind of indicators to be, for example, Rosie, and I guess the system can kind of pinpoint, are you acting the way that you have been previously to gain access? Wow, haven't come across that. So that's interesting. Thank you for kind of running through that in simple terms for me.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key differentiators for Andromeda, right? And it's
Mm.
it's a hard problem. Remember, we said that you want to solve the hard problem. It's a hard
Yeah.
problem because we have built or we build in any enterprise a behavioral model and a risk quantified risk model for every human and non-human identity based on the historic behavior, which means we are actually ingesting historical logs as soon as we onboard in an enterprise to understand what this identity has done. You don't wait for 90 days to build the model. We look at the last 90 days of data to build that behavioral model. So doing this log analytics, ingesting the logs, and there are millions or billions of logs in any decent sized enterprise, into a scalable platform and being able to build this behavioral model, that's been the hard problem that we have solved, and that's our differentiator.
Do you think that's kind of helping, I guess, build trust as well, kind of within security teams, engineers, anyone that's kind of coming up against this? Because I think with a lot, when you introduce any new tooling or system or anything like that, I think there's automatically friction and walls come up. Do I trust this? Do I not? But it seems like in my brain, you kind of you are buying into it so much that you have to trust it. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, yes, I think any new tool or any enterprise is first going to say, well, show me the value, show me the proof, right?
Yeah.
So one of the key things that we do is actually a couple of things. One is our AI models, our ML models have a built-in confidence levels, and we're going to only recommend something once we feel that we have enough data. Others will tell you, look, we don't have enough data to make you a recommendation. But also, the second aspect of it is when you deploy Andromeda, we start with what we call observation or read-only mode, where we'll just give you recommendations, but we won't make any changes, right? And so you build the trust, you make the changes on your own, you make sure you're comfortable with that. And then in a phased manner, you roll out, let's say, more automated remediation kind of implementations or deployments, right? So it's also a phased approach. And we give you full visibility. Look, this is the data. This is what we're seeing. Here is the proof behind this recommendation. So for example, if you say that, look, we haven't seen this, what have you seen? Here are the logs you're looking at. Here is the actions you have done. This is the reason why we're making the recommendation. So yes, it is about building the trust, but also it's about adopting the enterprise's operational model and doing it in a phased manner.
Okay, makes sense. And to be fair, this kind of trust point that I'm going on now is probably going to go on to the point I'm about to, or the question I'm about to ask. But you've obviously spoken a lot about AI and how Andromeda is kind of AI powered, I think is the term that you guys use. And I think we can't have any conversation, to be honest, about security without, or cyber, without discussing AI. It's the buzzword, obviously, and especially agentic AI at the moment. But what do you, or I guess, how do you decide where to apply AI and what to keep that human touch? And I guess that's what builds trust, is because you still have that balance between human and AI. But I guess, how do you decide that?
Right. No, that's a great question. So I think to have a good AI and ML models, right, you need to have good data, right? So that's where, if you remember a few minutes ago, I said we ingest a lot of data, activity data, entitlements data, and so on into a data lake. Once we have good quality data, that's when we apply different machine learning and AI models around risk quantification, behavioral analysis, anomaly detection, and so on. So that's one aspect, right? And again, we're being transparent around how we are using them, so you understand, you build the trust.
Yeah.
The second aspect is around large language models, generative AI, right? And that's where we use that in the platform for natural language summarization and analytics of large data. So this is where we make sure that it's anonymized data or a public data that's used to translate what we are seeing in a log format into an English language summary, analytics in an English language summary. So that's the second piece we apply AI into. And the third piece we apply AI into, where everybody calls about agentic AI. By the way, the word agentic AI is so overly used and misused,
Yeah.
right? But the third place we use AI is around natural language interface to interact with Andromeda, right? So we had a full API-driven platform where the intelligence, the context is built by the underlying platform and the machine learning and AI models. But we also will enable our customers to interact with Andromeda through intent, through natural language, say, do XYZ for me based on this, and we'll translate that into the right sort of APIs under the hood and do that for them. So these are the different places we use AI in Andromeda. It's not one size fits
Fantastic.
all, right? It's really what you're trying to do, with what problem you're trying to solve and how.
Makes sense. And you're right. I think it's using AI kind of to, as an ally, as a teammate, to kind of better the product and the user experience as well. I mean, even thinking about kind of day to day, how I use AI, um, it's to kind of what get 30% of your time back if you could, what
Mhm.
would you do with it? I feel like that's the conversation I'm having kind of on a day to day basis. Um, I guess
So
then the
if I may
question.
to if I may add to that, Rosie, right? You said like how does AI help you? You said 30% of the time, right? So this is where the context helps. So for example, let's look at the before and after. If you're doing a privilege access management approval today or a user access review, that governance, recertifications, today it's a rubber stamp because when somebody gets an approval request, they have no context. They have no idea whether they should approve it or reject it, right? That's where we use AI-based recommendations to, first of all, if all looks good, don't even ask them. Or if you want a human in the loop always, it goes to the human in the loop, but they get the context saying this part looks good, this doesn't look good. That's where the 30, 40, 50%, even 80% productivity gain comes in because based on the behavioral analysis, the context that we have built is helping humans make the right decision
Yeah.
because without that, they don't have the right context. And either they end up rubber stamping it, which is defeating the purpose of security, or
Mhm.
they're wasting so much time asking people saying, hey, why do you need that? Or why do you still need that? Right? That's where it's AI powered and helping humans make a better decision.
Okay, makes sense. And I guess it kind of leads to my next question, and we have kind of touched upon it already, but I think just to dive into it a little bit deeper as a more kind of general discussion. Obviously, when we talk about AI, we have to, I guess, discuss the kind of ethical and the governance behind it. And I think we're even starting to see now laws and policies starting to come up. I guess what are the challenges about kind of implementing AI? And it's probably quite a broad question, actually, thinking about it now. But the challenge is when implementing it into security because it is changing so much.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think a few things. We touched upon one aspect, which is trust. Are you transparent into how you're using AI in the platform? Like we described how we use in different places. And these are optional. You can have the customer say, I don't want you to use AI here. I always want manual or disable that part, right? So it's a trust and transparency. The second aspect is privacy. Are you using customer data for training? We don't, right? We don't use customer data for training. Or are you sending customer data for into any public LLM models? No, we don't. Again, so how do you also um, uh, do and show and be transparent about where the data are being used. First of all, we don't even use customer data. It's mostly metadata. And the metadata is not used to train the models. We train the model on public or synthetic data. And if whenever we use the large language models, it's none of the customer data or even metadata goes into the prompt. It's all anonymized or just a natural language public data that goes into the LLM models. So I think that's where
Yeah.
you need to, as I said, right, building trust by being transparent and from the privacy point of view, how using the data or not using data, and again, being transparent about it, that's important.
And I guess out of interest, and again, this might be quite a difficult question to answer, so apologies if I'm kind of put you on the spot. How are you keeping up, I guess, with the kind of constant change when it comes to like policies and laws and everything like that? Because I think it's such a grey area at the moment. Like even obviously I'm in the UK and we've had, I think it starts next August. There's a bunch of kind of laws coming in. To do with AI, and I'm sure it's all going to change within the next kind of 10 months anyway. But how is kind of Andromeda keeping up with it?
No, I think you mentioned it correctly, right? I
Mm.
think as a principle, if we start with the transparency and not using any customer data for any of the AI models,
Mhm.
then or training the models, I should say, then I think that's a good place to be in. And yes, the laws are evolving, and we keep a tab on them. Our
Yeah.
customers keep a tab on them. They kept us honest from a regulations point of view. So yes, it's a dynamic, evolving market
Mhm.
and laws, and so we're trying to keep a tab on it as best as we can. But I think it's at the end of the day, we feel confident that our architecture is such that we because we are not using customer data for training, because we are not using them for any LLM use, it's I think we feel confident about it. Now, there'll be cases where there'll be some customers in certain regulatory industries says you cannot use it this way. Then the third thing that we would do is saying, okay, we will give you the flexibility of using or not using certain AI models or certain capabilities in the product, which may be conflicting with your internal regulatory or compliance requirements. So I think that flexibility in the architecture is also important.
Makes sense. And using the, I guess, the customer feedback kind of like you mentioned there. I guess kind of on that same note, not really talking about, I guess, kind of AI here, but as organizations are kind of scaling as well, and that's, I guess, an increase of maybe employees or more complex kind of integrations even, and I guess identity surfaces are going to get more complex as well. How is Andromeda kind of keeping up with that?
Right. No, I think that's built into our fundamental architecture, right? The engineering team that has built Andromeda has over 15, 20 years of experience building enterprise-grade architectures. Most of the core engineers before this were at a company called Avi Networks, where we sold to Fortune 100, Fortune 50 companies. Before that, they built large-scale enterprise architecture at Cisco. So what we feel very good about and confident about is the platform architecture that we have built. By design, it's been a scale out architecture. And yes, things evolve as the number of identities, the types of identities, number of environments, the connectors, the number of use cases that continue to evolve. We continues to evolve. We continue to evolve our architecture, but the foundation has been built in a way to serve the future growth of customers, their scale, and the use cases.
Fantastic. Well, I'm really excited to kind of watch Andromeda's growth. Obviously, been around for what, 2.5 years, I think we said. I'm excited to see what the next kind of 2.5 years look like. Anything kind of, I guess, coming down the pipeline that we should be kind of looking out for, or anything exciting?
Well, we are continuously adding new capabilities,
Fantastic.
onboarding new customers. So in such a dynamic world, there is no one big milestone. It's
No.
every week. Every week is a new
Every
release with
day.
new features, right? Frankly, yes, Les,
Mm.
and that's the speed with which we move, right? So it's every day is an exciting day for us. But no, a lot of good capabilities are coming down the road, as I said, in every week, every month, and new use cases, new connectors, new capabilities.
Fantastic. And if any kind of listeners want to reach out, and we'll drop kind of links and everything, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, go to our website, andromedasecurity.com, or just send me an email at ashish@andromedasecurity.com.
Fantastic. Well, it was great having you on this episode, and yeah, looking forward to the journey.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rosie, for having me. It was a good conversation, and I enjoyed it.